All right, we are beginning a study of the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4. The story actually goes all the way through verse 42. It's a long story. We're obviously not going to get through all of it today. I'm hoping we'll get near half of it. Let me just say a couple things. You know, you got to remember that John's purpose over all things is to reveal Christ as the Messiah, to reveal Jesus as the Son of God. And so he's certainly doing that as he interacts with the Samaritan woman. We also see here kind of a pattern for how we could approach the unbelieving world as he approaches this unbelieving Samaritan woman. So we'll be picking up that as we go. But the third thing I want you to pay attention to is I want you to sometimes see yourself as the Samaritan woman. She is learning more and more about who Jesus is, and she's confused much of the time. And I think maybe that's where we are much of the time. We're confused about who Jesus is and what he wants for us, what he wants from us. And so pay attention to the Samaritan woman, not as somebody else, but as a representative of us. We'll say here this is the first time, if you look down at verse 26, this is the first time that Jesus himself says that he's the Messiah. When she asks in verse 25, the Christ will come, and Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. What's amazing about this is that, as I said, this is the first time he has said this. He doesn't say it to the religious leaders. He says this to this woman, to this outcast woman, to this Samaritan woman. By the way, Samaritans, do we remember who the Samaritans are? Anybody remember who the Samaritans are?
Jews hated them.
The Jews hated them. The reason they hated them was when the Jews got taken away to Assyria, to Babylon, there were some Jews who remained in the land. Those who remained in the land, the Assyrians were then placed back into that region. And the ones who remained in the land intermarried with those Assyrians. And this was a big no-no. So the Jews, when they came back into town, looked upon those people that stayed and intermarried as dogs and less than dogs. And so these are the Samaritans. So you have this woman, she's a Samaritan. She's also an immoral woman as we get into it. She's also an ignorant woman, and she's indifferent about Jesus. She's not seeking after Jesus, as we saw Nicodemus, who was kind of seeking. This woman is not seeking. It's the very opposite of Nicodemus. So I think the story is supposed to be a contrast to Nicodemus, and we'll see that many times. And yet it's her. It's not Nicodemus. It's not a Pharisee. It's her that he makes this declaration to. This is a stinging rebuke to Israel, right? That he comes as their Messiah, but the first time he reveals himself is to this Samaritan woman. And it's also a testimony that this message is not just to the Jews, but to everyone, and even to the Samaritans. The other thing I'll just want you to pay attention to as we go through this, Jesus never gets stuck on her background. He doesn't get stuck on that she's a Samaritan. He doesn't get stuck that she's indifferent, doesn't get stuck that she's ignorant, doesn't get stuck that she's immoral. He doesn't get stuck on her background at all as he's trying to bring her into the kingdom of God. So again, something else to pay attention to as we go through this story. All right, let's go back to verse 1 then in chapter 4 and kind of get started in this. It says, therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John. So notice that it said Jesus knew that the Pharisees had heard and that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John. How did he know this? How did he know what the Pharisees had heard?
Knows everything. All knowing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. He's Jesus. Dagnabbit. He knows everything. He knows what's going on in the Pharisees. And the Pharisees had started thinking that Jesus had baptized more disciples than John. Then you see down in verse 2, right? Though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples did. And we talked about this last time we were together, that Jesus was not, Jesus baptized maybe some people, but mostly he did not baptize because he didn't want people getting going to people's heads that, oh, I got baptized by Jesus. You only got baptized by his disciples, right? We saw that in a picture that Paul ran into the same situation, that he baptized a few people. And then he said, well, that I'm not baptizing anymore because it'll go to your heads. And so I think we have the same situation here with Jesus. Anyway, so Jesus, he leaves Judea and goes to Galilee, right? Verse 3, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. When he goes to Galilee, which is all of chapter 4, he's there for about a year, because actually if you look down to chapter 5, you see that in chapter 5, he's going back up to Jerusalem. He's going back up for the Passover. So chapter 5 is a year later when he goes back up to Jerusalem for the Passover. So here we have, after the first Passover, that he is going up from Judea and going to Galilee. Now, why did he leave Judea? Why did he leave Judea? You would think that leaving Judea would his disciples would think was a bad idea. He's having great response in Judea. There's a lot of people following him, coming after him. He had this amazing thing go on in the temple, right, where he cast everybody out. I mean, everybody's getting to know him. Why does he leave Judea?
Well, my Bible tells me to avoid trouble with the Pharisees.
Your Bible in your notes at the bottom, or your Bible as you're reading it and understanding it?
Yeah, the
So go back to verse 1, right? And skip verse 2 and read it together. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. They're trying to tell you why right there. That's why he left. He left because Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John. Because of this, then he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. So why did he leave?
Avoid trouble.
I didn't hear you, CT. What'd you say?
Avoiding trouble, issues,
So why is he trying to avoid trouble?
not time yet.
Yeah, it's not time yet, right? It's not that he's afraid. We read in chapter 3 just last time, he was given all authority and all power, right? This is not somebody who's afraid of the Jews. This is somebody who has a time. He has a plan, right? If you go back to chapter 2, even when he was in Cana, chapter 2, verse 4, I'll just read it to you. It says, he's talking to his mother. He says, Jesus, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Right? This is a phrase that he uses over and over. We see it in chapter 7. We'll see it in chapter 8. His hour has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. Finally, in chapter 12, he says, my hour has come, as he goes into his final week. But he had a plan. He had a timeline. It wasn't time for him to come face to face with the Pharisees and have it out. And so he's leaving Judea. He's decided to leave Judea and go on to Galilee. Now, there's another reason, and that reason is in verse 4. But he needed to go through Samaria. He needed to go through Samaria. Now, that's not just a geographical issue, right? So from Galilee's down the south. Galilee's in the north. Judea's in the south. So he's going from Jerusalem up towards Galilee. Samaria is kind of in the way. It's a region in the middle of the country, right? That you would go through in order to get to Galilee. But however, most Jews would not do that. And certainly a rabbi would not go through Samaria. They would go around Samaria, either go west along the coastline of the Mediterranean or go east, go over the Jordan River and go east to go up to Galilee, because they hated the Samaritans, because to go through the Samaritan land would defile them. And so they would not go through Samaria. So when he says here he needed to go through Samaria, it was not because geographically that was the way you had to go in order to get there. So why is it necessary for him to go through Samaria?
He had an appointed meeting with this woman at the well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He had a sovereign appointment that was necessary for him to go through Samaria and meet this woman. I have to go through Samaria. I have an appointment that I have to keep. The other thing, just to say, right? So we're going to talk a lot about God's sovereignty, both this week and next week. But, that God's in charge. Jesus here is in charge of what is going on, right? He's making a decision to go through Samaria because he wants to meet with this woman. Yeah, he also left, right, because of the Pharisees, right? I think we need to recognize when Jesus does something, there are many things that are going on. There are many purposes that he is fulfilling. We typically figure out, well, maybe it's because he was didn't want to interact with the Pharisees. Maybe it's because he had this appointment with the woman. But Jesus, when he does things maybe for a million different purposes. And maybe we can guess a couple of them. But I think the same thing is true today. When Jesus acts, he's fulfilling his sovereign purpose. And sometimes we can't see it, and we don't understand it, and we don't know why he's doing something, right? But you always got to recognize that Jesus is doing things because he's decided to do them. It's in his sovereign purpose to do so. Jesus graciously, purposely does what he does, both for the Samaritan woman, for the Pharisees, and for you and me. All right. Again, we're going to revisit that theme a little bit later, but I want you to see it right up front. All right, let's look at verses 5 and 6 together for a minute. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. So Samaria, what's interesting is Samaria was the capital of Israel, before they got moved away to Assyria. Samaria then became known as kind of this whole region, right? This whole area in between Judea and Galilee. He's talking here about the city of Sychar. The city of Sychar is probably a 20-mile hike from Jerusalem. So they have hiked up 20 miles, which typically would be a very long hike. They've gotten to Sychar, and obviously he's tired and weary, hot. The 6th hour, that would be noon, right? And you see a picture here of the humanity of Jesus, right? He's hot, he's tired, he's sitting down at this well, and as we see in a minute, asking for a drink. I want you to skip verse 7 for a minute and go down to verse 8, because it says, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. So Jesus is here at the well by himself, right? He has sent his disciples away to go into the city to buy food. And that's not a minor thing. For the disciples to go into a Samaritan city would be something they wouldn't want to do. They wouldn't want to go into a Samaritan city because of the dogs, right? Because of those people that live there that they look down upon. It would be a no-no for them. And also, they certainly wouldn't want to get their food. Oh, my goodness, you would never eat Samaritan food, right? But Jesus sends them there. The other thing to recognize is Jesus sends them there, not just to get food. Well, I mean, how many people does it take to get food, right? Does he need a half a dozen people to go get food? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. He does it because he wants to have a one-on-one interaction with this woman, right? Again, it's about his sovereignty. It's about what he's trying to do. He had an appointment with this woman, and he's making that appointment, and he's making sure the disciples are not there. We'll come back to them a little bit later. All right, so let's look at verse 7 then. Verse 7, a woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Several things here. Number one, God meets her doing the ordinary things of life, right? She was not at a church service. She was she was not in church, and somebody helped her to see Jesus. She was doing the ordinary things of life. God reaches out to her in the ordinary things of life in order to help her understand who he was. Now, the other thing to see in here, this woman comes at noon, which would be a very weird thing for her to do. Normally women, well, drawing water was women's work. That's not unusual. But they would normally come at dusk when it was cool, not in the middle of the day. She's coming at noon in the middle of the day in order to draw water. Why is she doing that?
She's like an outcast from her lifestyle.
Exactly. She's an outcast. She does not want to be there when the other women are there. The other women are all going to be looking down their nose at her, going to be sneering at her, right? So because she's a outcast woman, she is coming at this unusual time. You know, we're going to find out that she's an adulterous woman. She's been married 5 times, you know, all of that stuff. And so the other women would definitely be looking down on her. And in fact, really, she's not worthy of the attention of the Son of God. But to the Son of God, she's worthy of the attention of the Son of God. You know, in our minds, this would not be somebody that Jesus would meet with. I mean, come on. She is a sinful, outcast Samaritan woman, but she's worthy of the attention of the Son of God because the Son of God says she's worthy of his attention. Second thing, the statement, give me a drink. This would be a shocking thing to have happen. Number one, men do not speak to women in public, and particularly rabbis. There's no way rabbis would speak to women. In fact, rabbis, when they're out in public, will not even speak to their own wife and children, right? They're quote, above all that, right? So for him to speak to her is crazy. For her to speak to an outcast Samaritan is crazy. To speak to an adulterous woman is crazy. And he's saying, give me a drink. Well, that infers that he doesn't have anything to get a drink with, right? So he's asking her for a drink from her bucket, from her dipper, right? So this statement is a very strong, shocking statement that he makes here. We kind of look at it, go, well, it's kind of a curse, short and succinct, and just give me a drink, you know. But you got to realize, in the day and time, it would be way crazier than that, way stranger for him to be saying, give me a drink. And you can see that in her response as we get to verse 9, right? Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans, right? She is shocked. She is blown away that this guy would even ask her for a drink. And she recognizes that he's a Jew, probably from his dress, and that he's a rabbi, probably from, they wore tassels on the bottom to indicate that they were a rabbi. Jesus by this time would probably be wearing that kind of outfit. The other thing you got to see in this is it's fascinating. The last statement says, for Jews have no dealing with Samaritans, is a really poor translation. He's really saying, we Jews and you Samaritans don't share in things that we do together. We don't do things together. And more specifically, we don't share utensils together.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he's really saying to her, what she is really saying to him is, you would not drink out of my cup.
Mm.
There's no way you would drink. And, for those of us who've been around a while, we can go back to the racial problems this country had, right? And there were times when for a white person to drink from a black person's cup would be, oh my goodness, you just would never do that, right? Because of the racial disgust that was in the culture at that time. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. She's saying, no way are you going to drink from my cup. No way are you going to drink from my bucket. We don't have dealings with you in that way. We don't have any interactions with you. So the gracious reaching out of Jesus here to this woman is just amazing. Okay. And I just got to get you to think of yourselves as who's outside of your scope of ministering to. Who are the people you say, well, I'm not going to minister to them because of whatever, right? There was no limit to who Jesus would minister to. He went to the absolute bottom of the barrel here as he interacts with this Samaritan woman. All right, let's go on to verse 10. Verse 10, Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So first thing to note there is, he doesn't say anything about this drinking with the cup. He doesn't say anything about this. She's a Samaritan woman. He doesn't say anything about that she has different religious beliefs than him. He blows right past that, right? We would have had a 15, 22-hour discussion on, what Samaritans believe and what Jews believe and why, blah, 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 blah. This is not important to him. What's important to him is living water. What's important to him is the offer that he needs to give her about living water. And that's what he does. He jumps right into this discussion about living water and just goes right on past the point that she's a Samaritan, he's a Jew. And in fact, what's interesting is, right, he reverses the situation. He comes there asking for a drink. And then the next thing he does is says, if you knew that I had living water, you'd be asking me for a drink, right? She's now the thirsty one. He turns the tables completely around. By the way, Jesus never gets a drink, right? The whole story goes on and on. Jesus never gets a drink. He was not there to get a drink. That was not what was important to him. What was important to him was to get her some living water. Jesus never used his miracle power for his own self. He always used it to bring other people to him. He reversed the situation and he says to her, if you knew who I was, if you knew the gift of God, if you knew the gift of God, there's a free gift of God. He doesn't ask her to do anything, to say anything, to be anything. He just says, I want you to know that there's a free gift of God. And again, as we look at this as kind of an example of how we could reach out to unbelievers, this is definitely the first thing, right? To help them to understand that there's a free gift and there's a free gift of God. And he's saying, if you knew me, you would have asked. If you knew who I was, if you knew me, you would have asked, right? We've talked about this before. In order for her to ask for him, she's got to know him. She's got to know who he is. So when we talk here about the living water, this is the same expression that Jesus used when he talked to Nicodemus. But in Nicodemus, he talked about rebirth, right? He talked about regeneration. That's the gift of God. And he's saying here, the gift of God is living water. He's using a different expression for the same thing. You must be born again. You must take the gift of living water. It's the same thing. And all you have to do is ask me for it. If you knew who I was, you would ask and you would get living water. Unbelievers are going to be sent to hell because they've not asked for the free gift. They don't want it. They don't know about it. They don't understand it. But you got to ask for the free gift. By the way, living water is all through the Old and New Testament. I'm not going to spend time going through all of them, but I do want you to look at just a couple. Turn to Jeremiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 2. And this was what's amazing, as we've said so many times, that the Jews did not understand what Jesus was talking about, but all that Jesus was talking about was in their Old Testament. So in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13, it says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." So he says they've ignored me, who is the fountain of living water. And they've made for themselves their own fountains, their own cisterns, their own water, which is nasty, broken cisterns. And they would rather have those than actually turn and get the living water. So it's an amazing statement here in the Old Testament. You see Jeremiah again in chapter 17. We won't go there, also talking about the living water. I want you to turn to Psalm chapter 36. Psalm 36, verse 7. Psalm 36, verse 7. Mine says, "How precious is your loving kindness, O God. Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of your wings. They are abundantly satisfied with the fullness of your house. And you gave them drink from the river of your pleasures. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light." The fountain of life. And I'll just throw out a couple more. We don't have to go look at it, but Isaiah 12, he says, "Draw water from the wells of salvation." Isaiah 55, "Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters." In John 6, where we are, he says, "He who believes shall never thirst." In John 7, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me." So over and over, he uses this picture of living water, of this fountain of living water. And, well, we're going to get more into it as we go further. So that's just the beginning of the picture. Let's look at 11 and 12. It says, "The woman said to him, 'Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as well the sons and his livestock?'" Right? This is just pure sarcasm, right? You remember our good friend Nicodemus, right? What? Am I going to go back into the womb and be born again? Right? This is exactly what's going on here. This woman hears about the free gift, hears about being born again, and her sarcasm just drips. Well, how are you going to draw? You don't have a cup. You don't have anything, right? And by the way, are you greater than Jacob, who made this well, and his sons and his livestock? Well, Jesus answers that question in 13, and his answer is, "Yeah, I am." He doesn't say it that way, but so let's look at 13 and 14. Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." Yeah, I am greater than Jacob. Jacob gave you a well that gave you water that you have to come back to over and over and over. I'm going to give you water that springs up within you. That is a water that is a well, not just a bucket, a springing fountain that nourishes constantly, that rejuvenates over and over, that brings. So again, this, for us, this living water, the other picture we have in the New Testament is the Holy Spirit, right? He's offering her eternal life. He's offering her this fountain of youth, if you will, eternal, godlike life, soul satisfaction forever, this fountain. So again, this is where I want you to think of yourself as this woman, right? Because this is what Jesus has promised us, that we will have this fountain that springs up within us, currently, constantly nourishing us, rejuvenating us, bringing us new insight, new understanding, new hope, a deeper relationship, new love. When I say new love, I mean deeper, richer love, new everything from this fountain. Look what he says about it here. He says that it's the gift of God, this living water that will never thirst again. The water actually is a well, and the water gives eternal life. Sometimes I believe that we have reduced the gospel to conversion. Get saved, go to the front, say a prayer, and you're saved. You're good, right? Rather than getting this living fountain, getting this life-changing source of power and beauty and love and the unsearchable riches of Christ. That's what the gospel is about. That's what he's promising her here, a living water inside of you. I'm afraid sometimes we ignore that. We have the Holy Spirit inside of us. And he's supposed to be changing us. He's supposed to be enriching us. He's supposed to be making us better and more like Christ. Verse 15. The woman says, "Sir, give me this water." Oh, great. She figured it out. She wants the water. She wants this new relationship. She wants to be redeemed, right? Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw.
I can't help you with that.
I don't know where to go from there. All right. Anyway,
Yeah.
obviously, Siri cannot help you with that. Anyway, what is she doing here? Is this mockery? Is she just playing the game? Or I think what's going on is she's saying, okay, if you can give me this special water that I never have to draw here again, let me have it, right?
Mhm.
I'll take it. Give me that water. I'll use it so I don't have to come back here anymore, so that I get water all the time. I'm for that water. And I think that this is where many false Christians get to. I want this new people of God. I want this worship experience. I want this new friends and relation. I want to get rid of all my sin, right? I want it for me. I want it for my needs. I want it to overcome my problems. That's what she wants it for, right? Not for him, not to know Christ, not to have a relationship with him, but because she doesn't want to have to come and drink water all the time. So then we get to verse 16. Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." Jesus hears her statement in verse 15 and realizes she's not there yet. And so in verse 16, he says, "Go, call your husband and come here." By the way, this is a command. Go, call your husband, bring him back here. What's Jesus doing here?
He's looking for to tell the truth.
Yeah. When he asked the question, he knew the answer, right? He knew when he asked her to get her husband that she did not have one. He is exposing her sin to herself. He's exposing her sin. Look for a minute back in chapter 3. Excuse me. Chapter 3, verse 20. Chapter 3, verse 20, Jesus says, "For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed." This is the woman. She doesn't want to come to the light. She doesn't want to get this living water. She doesn't want to understand who he is really, because her deeds will be exposed. Her sin will be exposed. And what Jesus is doing here is beginning to expose her sin. And then there's another interesting thing in this verse, on the wrong page. Call your husband and come here. The word here is interesting. In 15, right? "Sir, give me the water that I may not thirst, nor come here to drink." I think the here was a problem for this lady. This is the here. This is the place where she's ridiculed. This is the place, again, where the other women come and despise her. I'm not bringing my husband here. I'm not coming here. I want to stop coming here. I don't want to have to come here. So it's not just her saying, I don't want to have to draw water. I don't want to have to come here anymore. Go call your husband and come here, Jesus says. We've got to address this here. Verse 17, the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You have well said, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one that you have now is not your husband. In that you truly spoke." She has had 5 husbands, most probably because of adultery, that she has left one husband and gone to another, right? No one needs to tell Jesus this, as we learned at the end of chapter 2. He knows all. Not only does he know everything about what is going on in your life, he knows your history. He knows your background. He knows that this woman has a cavernous need that she is fulfilling with adultery, that she's fulfilling with 5 husbands and living with a boyfriend who's not her husband, right? He knows she needs living water to fill that cavern, to get real satisfaction. But in order for her to accept that, her sin has got to be dealt with. When we evangelize without dealing with sin, we end up with a false salvation. We end up with someone who's deceived about their condition. Oh, yeah, I went down front. I said the words. I'm now a Christian. But they haven't dealt with their sin. Faith and repentance have to go together for true salvation. One other thing to notice in these verses before we go on to is look at, again, at the end of verse 17. He says, "You have well said." Good job saying you have no husband. And then at the end of 18, right, now you now have, is the one you have now is not your husband. You have spoken truly. He tells her twice she's telling the truth. Good job in telling the truth. You said right, you have no husband. Good job, you spoke truly. I think this is irony on Jesus's part, because what he's telling her is, you're telling the truth, but you're not telling the whole truth. You're telling the truth, and that truth is concealing the full truth. Secret sin is often concealed by telling the truth. Yes, I have no husband, is all she says. I have no husband. He says, yeah, but you've had 5 husbands, and the one you're living with now is not your husband. Secret sin is often concerned. Oh yes, I don't do that. It's the Pharisees again, right? I don't do that, but meanwhile, they're doing many other things. Meanwhile, they're in deep sin. sin is often covered not with a lie, but with truth, a partial truth, a little bit of the truth. And we hide the rest of the stuff. We hide the lie part. That's what she's doing here. Verse 19, doing good. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and the Jews say that in Jerusalem is a place where one ought to worship. What is the woman doing here? What's she doing? Jesus has just told her, you are an adulterous woman having 5 husbands, and the one you're living now, you're living in adultery. And she starts talking about prophecy and worship. What's she doing?
Getting the focus off of herself.
She's changing the subject. She's changing the subject, right? This is the people who, when you're talking to them about Christ, say, well, what about those people in Africa who have never heard? What about that guy down the road who is a real sinner? He's much worse than I am. She's changing the subject. She doesn't want to talk more about her sin. She doesn't want to have a deep conversation about that. She changes the subject. And she does it by saying, you are a prophet. I can tell that you know stuff. and the only way you know that stuff is God has told you. She's beginning to feel conviction here. She's finally beginning to feel conviction. And as a result, she's changing the subject. And she changes it. Let's look at what she has to say. Sir, I perceive you're a prophet, right? She recognizes that he has some ability, some prophetic ability. Then she goes in verse 20. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is a place where you ought to worship. What is that about? Well, you remember when the Jews came back from Babylon, that they rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, right? When they did that, the Samaritan said, okay, great. Now we have the temple back. Let's all come to worship in Jerusalem. And the Jews said, no way, Jose. We are not allowing you Samaritans to come and worship in Jerusalem. You are half-breeds. You are dogs. We hate and despise you. There's no way you're going to worship in Jerusalem. So what did the Samaritans do? They built their own temple. They built a temple on a mountain there in Samaria, Gazarim or something like that. They built their own temple. So there were now 2 temples. There was a temple that the Jews used, and there was a temple that the Samaritans used. So this is what she's talking about. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is a place where you ought to worship. You know, our fathers said we worship here. You say you worship there. Which is it? Right? Which mountain are we supposed to worship on? By the way, the Samaritans at this time, their religion was essentially based on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. They didn't really much listen to the others, although they were aware of them. So they were still semi-Jews in what they believed, right? So they still believed in worship. They still believed in God. They still understood that there was a Messiah from the Pentateuch. But here she's diverting from the problem, from her sin, and she does it by talking about worship. Because unbelievers see worship as something external. It's something I must do. It's about the place. It's about this mountain or that mountain. It's about sacrifices and ceremonies. It's about this church or that church, this music or that music, this pastor or that pastor. Unbelievers are all focused on the externals of worship, the surface, the religion, not the relationship. So again, pay attention to yourself as this woman. Sometimes we get focused on the externals, right? We get focused on the stuff of worship rather than real worship. Verse 21. Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father." So, interestingly, again, enough, I need you to pay attention. She responds by diverting the conversation. Jesus does not take it back to her adultery. He doesn't say, whoa, wait a minute. We're not going to talk about worship until we get clear that you understand about your sin and that you turn from your sin, you move on and decide not to live with this man, right? Jesus was not so much worried about her sin as she was worried about her relationship with him. The most important thing was her relationship with him, not her sin. The first thing was her relationship with him, not her sin. We get stuck as we think about or attempt to interact with people about Christ. We get stuck in focusing on their background, their religious system, their sin, their past evil. Jesus is saying, let's ignore that for a moment and let's talk about living water. Let's talk about real worship. Worship has always been about the heart. Now, you got to say that this is an amazing statement by Jesus, by a rabbi, right? Saying that there'll come a time when you won't worship in Jerusalem. I mean, that would be, again, just something that a Pharisee would never say, right? He's saying eventually there will be no Jerusalem to worship in, right? No worship in Jerusalem. No worship on this mountain nor that mountain. No more sacrifices. No more priests. No more Sabbaths. Jesus is saying the whole thing is changing. Neither in this temple or in that temple. No more of us and them. No more of Samaritans and Jews. Worship is not confined to a place. It's also not confined to a nation. It has always been about the heart. And we've looked at those verses several times in the Old Testament. True worshipers do not demand a place or a ceremony. Worship is not Sunday at 11 o'clock. It's not music. Okay, so what is worship? What is worship?
When you're praising the Lord, no matter, like you say, no matter where you are, you can be out in the woods, you can be out on the boat, and you're just thankful and you thanking the Lord, you talk to him, you pray to him,
Relationship.
like he's with you.
You're telling them how worthy he is of your praise.
Good. All good. Turn for a minute to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Mine says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, or which is your reasonable worship. That's worship. Presenting your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God. Yes, it's praise. Yes, it's obedience. Yes, it's being in the presence of God. Yes, it's bowing down to him with our hearts. The last thing I want you to see here, and we'll close with this today, is Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither worship on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will we worship the Father. He has a lot to say about the Father as we get down into verse 23. So I'm going to hold that discussion, but him pointing out to her that we're worshiping the Father is a very important part of this story. So she's still not there. She still hasn't figured it out. She's still pushing back. Even now she's under conviction. But we'll see where she gets to as we move forward in the story. Sorry to stop midway, but the story is just too long to us to do all at once. But it's an amazingly great story, so I hope you'll be here next time to hear the conclusion of this. All right, any other questions on this or thoughts? So again, he introduces her to new birth, to this living water. She doesn't get it. She's looking for something for herself, something selfishly. And so therefore he points out her sin. He points out her sin. And then we have this conversation about worship. And there's a lot more to that conversation that we'll pick up next time. All right, anything else?
Yeah, I got one thing. I mean, basically, when he said at first, will you give me a drink? To me, that was just a setup for what he was gonna say next.
Yeah.
And you said something about our conversation. It made me think that, sometimes we can say something that will set it up for something else in the conversation. But in the same token, there's some people that I'm around sometimes, I will say something so that they won't go down the bad road and start telling me things, because I know what kind of stories they want to say. And I want to hear.
Yeah.
So you say, like, just say I saw him today. Say, how you doing? I could just say, oh, it's been a good day. We went to church this morning.
That's
Just say something to try to get them to think that I don't want to hear what you want to tell me. And I think
Go ahead. Yeah, and I think that what's interesting here is Jesus never takes her bait, right?
Mhm.
He never takes her bait to want to talk about the Samaritans, to want to talk about her sins, right? Never takes the bait. He moves on to what he wanted to talk about and what was really important in that conversation. So yeah, good point, Curtis.
it wasn't long ago, this guy that I know, he's a painter and stuff, but he started saying something. I said, that's it. I don't want to hear about it. Because I bad stuff, what he had been doing. And I just didn't want to hear the details.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to prayer requests. It looks like Hugh's not there, unless he's hiding.
I'm on vacation.
They're in Italy.
Okay. That's fine. So I'll take the prayer requests and that'll be fine. If y'all can help me get around the room. So again, I can't see everyone clearly, so please say your name as you say your prayer requests.
Turn off your recording.
Thank you. How can I forget that every week? All right.
But you have
That's why I have CT.